Whoops. Welcome to the Drunk Linux User. I'm Len. I am the Drunk Linux User. And yeah, oops. I am glad that there's at least one or two people out there watching this show because they corrected me on something that I had looked at and absolutely described it wrong two ways. Well, the first one was actually more of a joke than anything else. But let's get over to our desktop and take a look. This was on Linux Ready hardware. And remember, I had mentioned that when I was looking at this particular computer for Manjaro that it looked like there were beer tap handles on there. And then I erroneously stated that they were handles. Well, first of all, the thing is really, really small. I didn't even realize that. I wasn't even paying attention. But let's take a look at the comment, which was hilarious. Mwahahaha. Those aren't beer taps nor handles. They're antennas. Yep, they most certainly are. All right, so I messed up there. And so I replied, really? So, learned something new today? But it is true. If I were ever to make a computer with beer tap handles on it, I would market the crap out of that thing. So, sorry, I messed up. Those aren't handles. Those aren't beer taps. Those are antenna. All right, and also, let's take a look at this again just to give you some idea. Look at how small this thing is. I mean, this is a little puny computer. A long time ago, and most people are never going to remember this, but a long time ago there was a power amplifier from a company called Carver, and they had a power cube, and it was about that size. Little bugger could pump out 200 watts per channel too, and it was really cool. But anyway, I digress. I'm sorry, Manjaro. I didn't mean to mess up in talking about your computer, alright? So, speaking of mistakes, I ran across this article, 10 common mistakes first-time Linux users make. And I'm going to agree with most of these and put in a couple of things in there that I think probably should have some caveats to them. Now, first of all, it says that a lot of people avoid using the terminal and that Linux is a very terminal-centric operating system. The fact of the matter is, if you're just a casual user, you may never ever see this if you don't want to. Okay, you don't have to do. This is more for people who want, I guess, more direct and granular control of the operating system. So if you don't be scared off when you see stuff like this. If you're just going online, if you're just browsing and checking your email, or if you're writing letters and things like that, the odds are you may never ever have use or need for this terminal. Now, if you do learn something from it, that's good. You get a little more knowledge, a little more experience. That's totally up to you. New users also trying to run Exe files. Well, Exe only works on Windows, right? It won't work on Mac and it won't work on Linux. So if you're trying to work with something in Linux that is a Windows operating system style program, you should probably start looking in your software center on your system to see if you can find the same thing for Linux, or try to find an alternative. So yes, please don't try to run exe files. So you're not going to get anything. Using root too often. This one is something that I have seen on the message boards from a lot of people. They tend to use Pseudo for a lot of things that they really don't need to, getting into stuff that they really don't need to be getting into, and then they hose their system. So be mindful about using that super user do command, okay? And use it when you need it, okay? Choosing the wrong distribution. Yes, this is very, very, very easy to do. I strongly agree with this article in that before you install the distro, do your research on it. Find out what the desktops are like. Find out, is it something that's going to work on your computer as it is? Is how much memory it's going to take? All these things need to be taken into account, okay? If you don't like the way it looks and you're watching videos on YouTube, for example, and they this is KDE and blah, 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 and this is GNOME and this is how this works and this is XFCE, and you take a look at it and think, but you like the tiling windows, well, then I think you found your solution. You can still get those tiling windows, but maybe on a different distribution. Find out which distribution and the commands that you tend to like the most, okay? This is where I'm going to diverge a bit from the article. Looking for installation files instead of repositories. Using repositories are fine, but I have noticed that there are certain programs that not all repositories carry all of the features of a particular software. Maybe the person who packaged up that particular program, and for example, a repository for, say, Inkscape, didn't know how to package something with their dependencies to put it all together for you. Well, then you're missing that particular feature or function. It does happen. Not often, but it does happen. And a lot of times, if you want to go looking for software, you will find that they will offer the software as either a repository, so you just go through the command line thing, add your repository. They also have app images, flat packs. If you're on Ubuntu, they use snaps. There are deb files, .deb files that you can download and install. On a lot of operating systems like Pop! OS, and I'm trying to remember, there's a couple others like Linux Mint, they use a version of the DPKG program. In Pop, it's called Eddy, I believe. And let's double check that. Eddy. Yep, there's Eddy. So if you have a deb file, you can open it with this. It'll look for missing dependencies. If everything is in order, if they can pull what they need, this will install a .deb file. So don't rely too much on repositories. And the other thing about repositories too are that if the maintainer of that repository is not keeping up with the latest versions, you may find that this is one of those repositories, if you upgrade your system, that you will not be able to get an update for that particular software. So again, I tend to lean towards other ways of installing or updating, but there's nothing wrong with repositories. Just keep track of them. Using Wine instead of trying app alternatives. I honestly don't know how many people actually do this, but yes, you can install Wine and you can run a vast number of Microsoft Office programs. But that being said, yes, you should try to find alternatives either within the Linux, package manager that you have on your system, where you can go in and say, okay, type in Microsoft Office. Well, Microsoft Office isn't going to show up, but you'll see LibreOffice, you may see SoftMaker, you may see OpenOffice, you may see OnlyOffice, so on and so forth. Don't run Wine if you don't have to. It does suck up a lot of your resources. If you don't have a lot of RAM or a strong processor, things are going to go really slow and you're going to be more frustrated, and you'll just think, well, I'll tell you what, I'll just boot back into Windows. Being too carefree about security. We talked about this in a previous video in the Uh-Oh series about viruses. You don't want to download anything or everything that you see on the internet. Okay, that applies for Windows, that applies for Linux, Mac, so on and so forth. The reason for it is that if you don't have a trusted source, you're vulnerable, okay? As far as installing an antivirus on Linux, your call. I don't. I live dangerously. But I also back up everything every day too, so if something does go, I can always go back in and fix things up. Thinking Linux and Ubuntu are the same. I have talked with people who are fairly intelligent who do think that Ubuntu is Linux, and it's not. It is a distribution based off from Debian, which uses the Linux kernel, which is the operating system itself, the nuts and bolts of what makes everything run. Ubuntu takes Debian upstream and says, we're going to add all of our cool things to it. Other distributions, like what I'm using, Pop OS, they'll take Ubuntu, they'll put their spin on it. Same thing with Linux, Zorin, and many others. So they all use the Linux kernel, right? That is the Linux part of it. But Ubuntu is not Linux, okay? This is a minor point, but these things do matter, especially if you're trying to get help. Running any old command found on the internet. Yes, you do not want to just arbitrarily take and copy and paste into a terminal what you see on the internet. You could delete everything. You could leave a back door open for your computer and somebody can come in behind and just completely mess you up, steal your data, find your passwords, so on and so forth. Yeah, again, be mindful of the source. Sharing Linux files formats with Windows users. This may not happen in probably most situations other than maybe Office documents. Most places are using Microsoft Office, which uses .doc or .docx. Same thing with Excel. So don't send them a .odt file from LibreOffice, because even though Microsoft is starting to include some of that in with their latest Microsoft Office versions, it's not very good, and it's going to be a complete mess for most. Now, if the other person is using an older version of Office, it's not going to get it at all, and it's just going to look like a bunch of, alien artifacts on the screen. So don't do that. And I do agree with this. Mistakes are key to learning Linux, because if you've just transitioned over to Linux and you're trying to learn something, you are going to make mistakes. But I made mistakes in Windows. I made a mistake in Mac too. I got over it. I learned. I moved on. So again, if you're just doing something real common, simple, you may never ever see the terminal. You may just think, well, I'm working on something just as easy and simple as Mac or Windows. So don't let any of this faze you. If you're the social kind of person and you want to get in touch with other people, maybe in a face-to-face, as far as in a room setting, or maybe a Zoom call or Jitsi or whatever they decide they're going to use, I'm going to leave this up here for you, Linux links, and it's about all the user groups around the world that they have listed as of July 6th of 2022. I picked one at random. I picked Georgia, and then I went through here. Now, some of these do not seem to be, I don't know, probably because of the bug that went around the world. Some of them may have just shut down until they've decided that they're going to feel a little more safe. But what I did do is I did find this one in Macon, and when you click here, you'll see that they are still holding live face-to-face meetings. And this one, for example, at Panera Bread, you can see the history of the organization. You can just get in touch with these people and if you want to get together for soup, sandwich, and Linux, well, this is an alternative. And there may be other things. There's Meetup that you can possibly find something in your area. I think meetup.com. Give it a shot, huh? Oh. I think that's what it is. Yeah. So if you just want to try to find Linux, yeah. See, there's one in Tampa. There's a bunch of stuff going on in Tampa, Atlanta, more Florida, Virginia, Maryland, things like that. Also Facebook. I don't do Facebook really, but there's Facebook. You might find Twitter. I also think that Reddit has a pretty good community as well. They don't go face to face, but it is a conglomerate of people that are trying to help other people out. So my apologies to Manjaro and their computer manufacturer. I didn't mean to disrespect your little cube with its beer taps. I'm going to call them beer taps. Let's end this one on our words of wisdom. Don't drive drunk. Don't drink and drive. Don't go to eBay, Amazon. Use MS Edge, shopping all buzzed up, thinking you're going to buy the latest, greatest, and coolest stuff, because you're probably not. In the meantime, still too early in the day by the old clock on the wall. Bottoms up. Later, dudes.